la pandemia, y en este año hemos tenido la participación de universidades como la Universidad de Quebec-Montreal, la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, la Universidad Autónoma de Barcelona. Ahora tenemos el honor, el gusto que nos acompañe la Universidad Tecnológica de Michigan, universidad fundada a fin del siglo XIX, que en el siglo como escuela de minería, y en el siglo XX adquiere el nombre que la conocemos actualmente. Una destacado centro académico en la Unión Americana. Eh, Destaco la participación, la presencia del profesor Jonathan Robbins. El profesor Robbins es un especialista en historia medioambiental, material industrial del siglo XIX, siglo XX, y disertará acerca del estudio de estas áreas del proceso histórico y su conexión con la sociedad contemporánea. Nos va a acompañar en la interpretación Andrés Castañeda Faché, graduado de la Escuela de Historia de la Universidad Nacional Mayor de San Marcos, cuya labor destaco y resalto. Uh, Good morning, Jonathan. Thank you for your participation in seminar. We can start, please.
Oh, good morning, and thank you for the invitation to speak with this group. I'm honored.
Muy, muy buenas tardes y les agradezco la invitación para poder hablar a este grupo. Es un honor.
Today, I would like to share some small pieces from my own research and talk more broadly about the research that happens in my university department, which is a department of social sciences.
El día de hoy quisiera compartir pequeños pedazos de mi investigación y el poder hablar un poco más expansivamente acerca de la investigación que se realiza en el departamento de mi universidad, que es el Departamento de las Ciencias Sociales.
And I should say that my background is not in an approach to history as a social science, but rather as a humanities discipline.
Desearía mencionar también de que usualmente no trato de acercarme tanto a la historia como una ciencia social, sino más como una disciplina humanitaria.
Yes, and as a student educated from the humanities perspective, I was taught to not look for contemporary applications, contemporary lessons. This was something we were specifically warned against, that history does not offer lessons or instructions for today.
Como un estudiante educado en la perspectiva humanitaria, se me enseñó de que no debíamos estar buscando por lecciones o aplicaciones contemporáneas. De hecho, nos advirtieron en contra de ello, diciendo que la historia no tenía ningún tipo de instrucción o lecciones para el día de hoy.
But at Michigan Tech, I have spent 12 years working in a social science department by accident. And the experience has convinced me that there is value in applying historical research to contemporary problems and contemporary questions.
Pero en la Universidad de Michigan Tech pasé 12 años estudiando en un departamento de estudios sociales y la experiencia me convenció de que hay valor en realidad en encontrar también y aplicar la historia para resolver problemas contemporáneos.
And in my recent book on oil palm, I assumed that there was a broad relevance to contemporary issues, particularly deforestation and issues involving the expansion of plantations in a number of tropical countries.
En mi libro reciente, en que hablo acerca del palma de aceite, vemos de que hay una relación muy amplia para los problemas contemporáneos, sobre todo en el caso de deforestación y también problemas de expansión de plantaciones en un número de países tropicales.
I think I was naive in assuming that researchers in other disciplines and other social sciences and policymakers would naturally be interested in this history. To me, it seemed obvious that history was necessary to explain the importance today of the palm oil industry, of the oil palm plantation industry.
Creo que fue un poco también crédulo, en parte, en el asumir de que esta investigación y la disciplina en los estudios sociales sería algo que las personas que toman decisiones en diferentes países estarían interesados en realidad. Para mí me parecía algo natural de que en realidad el interés en la historia sería algo muy necesario y que no sería tan necesario también el explicar la importancia que se tiene en las palmas de aceite entonces y sobre todo para todo lo que se realizan.
Thank you. And my initial approach was to answer the question of why most palm oil today is produced in Southeast Asia when for 500 years this was an industry that was almost entirely found in Africa, in Western Africa. And this struck me as a major reversal, a major change that needed explanation.
En mi approach inicial, lo que yo estaba tratando de responder es el por qué la mayoría de este aceite de palma de olivo entonces es producido en el sureste de Asia, cuando hace 500 años esta industria fue básicamente fundada y usada también en el África Occidental. Esto me pareció que que se había revertido bastante en una forma muy grande en realidad, y este cambio merecía tener una explicación.
And what I hoped to show in the book was how legacies in Africa and Asia in particular, from the colonial period in the 19th century and the 20th centuries, led to these transitions, these changes in the global oil palm industry.
Y lo que queríamos ver con mi libro era como estos legados, tanto de África como de Asia, sobre todo durante el periodo colonial, llevó a esta transición y cambio en la industria del aceite de palma.
And one of the arguments I present in the book is that the shape of the industry today, the form it takes, which is largely of large plantations, has its origins in this colonial period.
Y lo que trato entonces de argumentar en el libro es que el cambio y la forma que está tomando esta industria hoy en día tiene sus orígenes en este periodo colonial.
And what I found in my archival research was that many of the organizations responsible for promoting oil palm cultivation, especially the World Bank, after 1950, used colonial models, colonial ways of thinking, and in some cases, the same staff as colonial governments in planning and implementing oil palm projects as new development projects in different parts of the world.
Y lo que descubrí en mi investigación de los archivos es que las organizaciones que son responsables para promover entonces el cultivo del aceite de palma, específicamente el Banco Mundial, después de 1950, ha estado usando tanto modelos coloniales y la misma forma de pensar, e incluso en varias ocasiones el mismo personal para implementar los planes y los proyectos para el cultivo del aceite de palma y en la industria.
Right. And this image is a map of a World Bank project in Papua New Guinea that used a model that was originally developed for Nigeria and was later tested in Malaysia, And it was a project that combined small-scale agriculture, campesino agriculture, with a small plantation as well, with the idea that the smallholders, the small-scale farmers, and the plantation work together to produce a commodity, in this case, palm oil.
En la imagen, aquí en el mapa, vemos cómo el proyecto del Banco Mundial en Nueva Guinea usa el modelo que había sido primero desarrollado para Nigeria y luego fue puesto en prueba en Malasia. Y él combinaba tanto agricultura a escala menor, por ejemplo, de tipo campesino, con agricultura basada también en plantaciones pequeñas, con los mejores agricultores trabajando juntos con los que tenían plantaciones más grandes, para de esa manera poder producir en una forma más comunitaria básicamente el producto que en este caso sería el aceite de palma.
And one of the things that I argue in the book was that this model was responsible for the early success of oil palm in many regions, and that it was profitable, it was in some ways sustainable, but it was abandoned in the 1990s and the 2000s in favor of plantations only.
Ahora, también argumenté en mi libro cómo este modelo es responsable para el éxito inicial en las regiones. Era, era un modelo que podía mantenerse, era un modelo que producía bastantes ganancias, pero también es un modelo que fue abandonado durante los 90, principio del 2000, y fue cambiado a un modelo en que únicamente se usaban plantaciones.
This is a scene from one of these mixed small-scale farmer plantation projects in the Philippines on the island of Mindanao. And it's an example of what I had hoped other social scientists would recognize as evidence of alternatives to current plantation systems, as alternative ways of cultivating oil palm that could be both environmentally sustainable and economically viable in different parts of the world.
Y estas son algunas escenas de unas de las plantaciones a baja escala, la cual fue realizada a través de un proyecto en las Filipinas, en la isla de Mindanao. Este es un ejemplo que esperaba que los otros científicos sociales pudieran ver como una alternativa a los otros sistemas donde había plantaciones más grandes y donde se podía cultivar entonces el aceite de palma, uno que sería más viable, sobre todo, más que ayudaría tanto para obtener ganancias y también sería uno que ayudaría bastante con ecología también.
Another goal of the book, and this was one of the few places where I attempted to directly address a contemporary policy issue, a policy debate, was regarding efforts to ban palm oil, efforts mostly by environmental activists in wealthy palm oil consuming countries. And I argued that these bans were misguided because they ignored the people who produced palm oil. And they viewed a single commodity as the environmental problem rather than these broader systems of plantation production and exploitation that were in fact driving deforestation and social problems in not just palm oil, but many other commodities as well.
Bien, uno de los objetivos de mi libro era el poder tratar de comenzar para este problema contemporáneo y tratar de introducir y hablar acerca de este problema contemporáneo de arte, acerca de los esfuerzos que ha habido para poder prohibir el uso entonces del aceite de palma, sobre todo por los activistas ambientales en los diferentes países del primer mundo que consumen bastante ese tipo de aceite de palma. Aunque muchos de esos parecen que no tener mucha de la información necesaria porque ignoran a las personas que trabajan para producir ese tipo de aceite y ven que solamente se trata de como si fuera una comunidad única en el que simplemente están produciendo y tratan de verlo como un problema ambiental, pero no lo ven como es un sistema de explotación en donde hay varios problemas sociales en muchas comunidades también, pero pero que aunque es cierto que también lidia con la deforestación, muchas de las personas que trabajan en este sistema necesitan también sobre todo para poder apoyarse.
Thanks. And when I finished the book and wrote some short articles, did some interviews, I expected I expected to have more impact, and I have been disappointed to see response from colleagues in social sciences who are simply not interested in history. They don't see this deeper history as relevant to the contemporary problems they are working on.
Y cuando terminé con mi libro, también hice algunos pequeños artículos, pequeñas partes y entrevistas, y en realidad esperaba que hubiera habido un impacto mayor. Y estoy un poco decepcionado a la respuesta que obtuve de mis colegas y científicos sociales, los cuales vi que no tenían mucho interés en la historia y no veían la relevancia que ésta tenía en los problemas contemporáneos que ellos estaban investigando.
And I don't take this personally. I don't think everyone has to read my book. But a lesson that I learned from this experience was that when historians are addressing a contemporary issue, they have to be very explicit and very clear about how a historical story connects to a contemporary issue or a contemporary decision.
Ahora, no lo tomo personalmente, no les estoy diciendo que lean mi libro y no voy a obligarlos tampoco, pero aprendí una lección a través de esta experiencia, que cuando la historia está tratando de lidiar con un problema contemporáneo, es necesario ser muy explícito en cómo el estudio histórico se conecta con ese problema contemporáneo en sí.
In my new project, oh, excuse me. In my new project, which is called Forgotten Fibers, I am taking a contemporary problem, which is the problem of plastics, and I am trying to make it the beginning for my historical research.
En mi nuevo proyecto, a Fibras Olvidadas, estoy nuevamente lidiando con un problema contemporáneo, en este caso el plástico, y lo estoy usando como base para el principio de mi nueva investigación.
And the project looks at two kinds of fibers and maybe more. Currently, I'm looking at an insulation fiber, kapok, which comes from a tree, Ceiba pentandra, and a rope making or cordage fiber called abaca or manila hemp. It's also a common name for it. And these were both fibers that were essential in heavy industry from about 1850 to 1950. It was impossible to think of industry without them. And then they vanished. They were replaced by plastics very quickly.
El proyecto está tratando de observar a dos tipos de fibra o más. Por ejemplo, está tratando de ver la administración de la fibra que viene del árbol conocido como la pendandra y también como un tipo de fibras de vainilla que se usa para crear tipos de cuerdas, pero ambos tipos de fibras eran esenciales para la industria pesada de 1850 a 1950. De hecho, era imposible el pensar que se podría realizar industria sin ellos. Luego, el plástico los reemplazó y ahora casi no se sabe nada de ellos en realidad.
And I am trying to approach this subject from two related directions, from what I call industrial questions and environmental questions. And the industrial questions focus on the material itself and the technologies surrounding it. And one of the things I am interested in learning, and this research is still in a very early stage, is how technological change and the material nature of fibers interacted and interacted with economic forces, with markets for the finished materials, as well as with the labor required to produce these raw materials, these commodities.
Ujú. Ahora, voy a tratar de lidiar con este sujeto en dos direcciones, tanto con preguntas industriales y preguntas ambientales. Cuando se trata de las preguntas industriales, voy a tratar de enfocarme en tanto el material y la tecnología en sí. Más que nada estoy muy interesado en aprender cómo es que la tecnología, cómo hubo el cambio de tecnologías y cómo hubo también el cambio en en las fibras naturales y básicamente el material usado y cómo esto interactuó con las fuerzas económicas y del mercado también para los materiales una vez que ya hayan culminado su proceso y al igual con la labor que fue necesaria para enfocarse en las comodidades que se crearon.
This is simply an image of the Kipok tree. You may have seen in tropical forest a very large version of the tree, but most of the fiber is harvested from much smaller, much younger trees, like the ones on the right.
Es una imagen del árbol Epoch. Es muy probable que hayan visto imágenes en bosques tropicales de un árbol mucho más grande, más grueso también, pero en realidad en muchos de los bosques se puede encontrar que las fibras se obtienen de los árboles muchos más pequeños, más jóvenes se podría decir, como los que se ven aquí en esta otra imagen.
Another dimension of what I am calling the industrial questions is the role of politics and political economy. Because as I've found in my preliminary archival research, politics and even military strategy had a great deal to do with changes in natural fiber industries. This is a political cartoon from 1938 suggesting that abaca, this fiber for making ropes, was tying together the Philippines and the United States.
Una dimensión también en la que quiero llevar para las preguntas industriales es el papel que tanto la política y la política económica tuvieron en este proceso también, porque como se ha encontrado también en mi investigación preliminar de los archivos, veo también que la estrategia militar y política tuvo bastante que ver en los cambios en la industria de la fibra natural, como por ejemplo, como se puede ver en esta caricatura política de 1938, el abacat, que se conoce como una fibra usada también para crear cuerdas, sogas, está mencionando aquí de cómo esto tiende a unir tanto a las Filipinas como a los Estados Unidos.
And I will add that one of the lessons I think I hope to communicate from this aspect of the research is that technological change was never simply about the technology or the particular materials, but about these political and economic contexts.
Una de las lecciones que espero poder comunicar en este aspecto social es como el cambio de la tecnología nunca se trató únicamente de los materiales o la tecnología en sí, sino también tanto de de los aspectos políticos y económicos.
The other dimension of this research project are questions more focused on the natural environment. And here I am particularly interested in the agricultural nature of these commodities, how they are grown, what labor they require, and how natural environments influenced the growth as well as the eventual disappearance of these commodities.
Una de las otras dimensiones que espero poder investigar en este proyecto son preguntas que se enfocan más en la naturaleza en el ambiente natural. Sobre todo está muy interesado también en tanto la naturaleza de la agricultura, de, es, las comodidades y cómo es que éstas tienden a crecer, y más que nada qué es necesario para que puedan crecer, cómo, qué tipo de labor se realiza, cómo el ambiente natural puede influenciar tanto el crecimiento o la desaparición de dichas comunidades.
Mhm. And as with the industrial questions, I'm very interested in looking at how local, regional, and global economic forces interact, and looking specifically at not an abstract capitalism, but specific corporations, specific firms, and individual employees of those firms, businessmen, scientists, others who are involved in making decisions about when, where, and how to grow commodities, and when to give up on them and switch to plastics, to other materials.
Mm, También otras preguntas estoy tratando de ver es en interés en ver cómo las diferentes economías, tanto globales, locales o regionales, pueden interactuar entre sí, viendo no únicamente al capitalismo en una forma abstracta, sino a corporaciones específicas, diferentes firmas o empresarios o personas, empleados individuales sobre todo, tanto como hombres de negocios, científicos, en fin, las personas que hicieron las decisiones, y también dónde, cómo y cuándo es que decidieron hacer para que pudieran hacer crecer este tipo de comunidades y cuándo decidieron simplemente darse por vencidos con ellas y hacer el cambio para el plástico o diferentes materiales.
And related to this, I'm also interested in learning the extent to which these natural fiber industries were actually sustainable. I think we tend to assume that organic materials are inherently better than plastics, but I've found that these fibers, particularly abaca, was grown on a large scale with plantation methods that involved significant amounts of deforestation. And so I'm interested in researching different elements that might contribute to the sustainability or lack of sustainability of these industries in the past.
Ahora, relacionado a ello, soy también muy interesado en aprender hasta qué extensión entonces se podía decir que esta fibra industrial se podía mantener, porque muchas veces asumimos de que los materiales orgánicos son mejores que los plásticos, pero hemos encontrado de que este tipo de fibras, como el abaca, era necesario de que fuera, que se pudiera cultivar para gran escala a través de métodos métodos de plantación, lo cual llevaba a una cantidad de deforestación muy elevada también. Entonces, el investigar los diferentes elementos estaría permitiendo de que se pueda estaría permitiendo para ver qué es lo que se puede mantener para el mantenimiento o la falta de mantenimiento en realidad en el pasado para el ambiente.
One of the things that has surprised me so far in this research is finding the extent to which these natural fibers did not disappear completely. I had assumed that um, they would have almost completely been replaced by plastics, but in fact, in the case of abaca, the world cumulatively produces as much today as it did in 1960. And Kepak is still also used in a number of very small industries. And so one of my new research questions that has come out of the preliminary research is understanding how industries can survive such strong competition from something like plastics and what lessons we can learn from that survival and adaptation.
Una de las cosas que me sorprendió durante mi investigación fue el descubrir que en realidad estas fibras naturales no habían desaparecido completamente del mercado en realidad, porque yo había asumido de que habían sido reemplazadas por el plástico, como había mencionado. Pero en el caso de el AK, tenemos de que aún se producía tanto hoy en día como se producía en 1960. Y la otra fibra también como el quinbaco que he mencionado, también es usada bastante en las industrias pequeñas recién nacientes. Y entonces mi nueva investigación también está tratando de hacer preguntas acerca de la investigación preliminar para de esa manera poder entender cómo es que esta industria pudo haber sobrevivido, sobre todo cuando estaba en competición con de los plásticos y qué lecciones pueden ser tomadas de ello.
Another question I have that I am still looking for answers to is what causes long established commodity chains to break, to stop functioning? And I think we have in popular culture and in some social sciences an assumption that technological change comes with big disruptions, big jumps, big inventions.
Um, Ahora, una pregunta más que estoy tratando de responder es ver qué es lo que pudo haber causado de que estas comunidades que habían sido usadas por tanto tiempo puedan simplemente dejar de funcionar, dejar de ser producidas y hacer el cambio así. Y creo que en nuestra cultura popular y sobre todo en las ciencias sociales se piensa de que el cambio en tecnologías viene con muchas disrupciones enormes, un gran cambio así de choque fuerte que puede causar así una especie de eso, algo que simplemente nos afecta inmediatamente a todos.
And what I found in the preliminary research is, and this is not an original insight for myself. The history of technology is a field that has long understood this. What I have seen is that there is no big change. There are many small changes that begin to pile up and accumulate. And it's these small changes that ultimately lead to a system-wide change. And one of the things I'm hoping to address in terms of speaking to researchers and policymakers who are thinking about plastics is thinking about what level of change, big change or small change, is necessary to make progress towards solving the problems of plastic pollution.
Ahora, lo que mi investigación preliminar ha encontrado, y no es y no es algo original que yo haya descubierto, es algo que el campo tecnológico ha entendido ya por bastante tiempo, es que no ha habido un cambio así repentino o fuerte, que de la nada, un gran cambio, como se podría decir. Son solamente pequeños cambios que poco a poco se van acumulando. Y estos pequeños cambios estarían llevando entonces a un cambio en el sistema mucho mayor en realidad. Lo que estoy esperando poder lidiar entonces es que se pueda hablar para tanto en la investigación y a las personas que están a cargo de las políticas, para que puedan pensar acerca del plástico, que puedan pensar acerca de qué nivel de cambio es necesario para realizar para poder hacer progreso, y sobre todo en el problema que se tiene con el plástico hoy en día.
I am borrowing an expression from economics and political economy. I believe it comes from the United Kingdom. I'm not sure who coined it, but it's the acronym TINA, Tina, and it's used for this expression, there is no alternative. And this is a term that emerged in the 1980s to talk about what was claimed to be the necessity of neoliberal capitalism, particularly in the 1990s with the decline of the Soviet system, that there was no alternative to capitalism. And I think this mindset, this way of thinking that there is no alternative, also applies to technological change, to environmental policies. And one of my hopes is that history can show that there were alternatives and that there are alternatives for the future.
Para poder entonces tomar prestada una expresión económica y de la economía política también, creo que viene también del Reino Unido. Es un acrónimo conocido como TINA, que se usa para poder explicar y básicamente significa There is no alternative. Eso significa no hay opción alterna. Es algo que es un acrónimo que se usó más que nada en los años 80 para hablar acerca de la necesidad del capitalismo neoliberal, más que nada debido a la caída y el decline de la Unión Soviética y el sistema comunista soviético también, porque entonces ya sabía que no había una alternativa al capitalismo. Esta forma de pensar también es aplicada al cambio tecnológico y a las políticas ambientales. Y mi esperanza es de que la historia pueda ver que sí hay alternativas, tanto para la política, la economía y para el futuro en realidad.
And to address this issue, one of the approaches I plan on doing in future research is developing a conceptual map of the individuals, the organizations, what contemporary policymakers would call stakeholders, who were involved in these industries to identify who had decision-making power, what compromises were made at which points. And the ultimate goal of this mapping exercise is to identify the points at which change finally occurs, at which change now appears to be inevitable, even if it was not inevitable in prior periods.
Ahora, uno de los problemas que quiero lidiar también son las diferentes formas en que se está realizando el desarrollo para las investigaciones en el futuro. Y para ello, estoy pensando también, no, disculpe, lo que estoy diciendo es que quiero tratar de, en el futuro realizar un mapa, un dispositivo conceptual, un desarrollo mapa conceptual para la investigación de las industrias y las organizaciones, que básicamente las personas que se a cargo de la política y de que se producen, se pueda entonces tratar de ver quiénes son los que estarían tomando decisiones y quiénes son los que estarían teniendo el poder, quiénes serían los que están teniendo básicamente las ganancias en este caso cuando se toman las decisiones, para que de esa manera podamos estar viendo cuáles son los puntos y cuál es el objetivo final para ello. Y qué compromisos son los que también tienen que lidiar para estos puntos en realidad. Ver en qué forma se puede realizar los cambios, en qué momento se puede realizar el cambio, en qué momento estos aparecen y ver si es que esto es inevitable o no en realidad, como se explica en eras anteriores.
And I want to conclude before taking questions by highlighting some of the research of my colleagues in the Department of Social Sciences at Michigan Tech, who have influenced me over 12 years in transitioning from a humanities-focused historian who studied the past for its own value toward a historian who is trying to apply historical research to contemporary social problems.
Para concluir, antes de que empiece a tomar preguntas, quisiera sobresaltar la investigación que mis colegas en el Departamento de las Ciencias Sociales en Michigan Tech son básicamente los trabajos que me han influenciado en mis últimos 12 años y que ayudaron en mi transición de un historiador enfocado en las humanidades que estudiaba la historia únicamente por su propio valor a un historiador que está aplicando su investigación histórica para los problemas que se ven en los estudios sociales hoy en día.
And so one of those colleagues I would like to highlight is Professor Nancy Langston, who is an environmental historian of United States history, and whose work has focused on the historical origins and historical evolution of government environmental policy.
Uno de ellos, aquí quiero mencionar, mi colega, es Nancy Langston, una historiadora ambientalista enfocada en la historia norteamericana, que se enfoca más que nada en los orígenes históricos y la evolución de las políticas ambientales del gobierno.
And one of the things that I have learned over the years from my colleague, Dr. Langston, is not only the value of historical research um, in understanding why policy works or does not work, but also the need for historians to very clearly communicate our understandings of history and the potential lessons to colleagues in other disciplines.
Una de las cosas que he aprendido de mi colega, la doctora Langton, es el valor que la historia entonces tiene para poder entender el por qué la política en tal caso funciona o no funciona, o si es que las leyes funcionan o no funcionan. Pero también en la necesidad de que el historiador y la historia pueda comunicarse claramente el entendimiento de esta historia y las lecciones que uno puede aprender o pasar para sus diferentes colegas en otras disciplinas.
And Dr. Langston has worked on policies regarding land management, toxic chemicals, and most recently, migratory endangered species. And her research has used history to show where there were gaps in scientific knowledge, and to show where there were conflicts between different interest groups. And the results of those conflicts, rather than pure scientific knowledge, she finds, was often what drove the development of policy, and ultimately is what causes the limitations of some policies in protecting environments, which is what they are designed to do.
Entonces, doctor Langton ha investigado sobre todo las políticas y leyes para la administración de tierras, para los químicos tóxicos, los movimientos migratorios para las diferentes especies, y usó la historia para poder ver dónde había simplemente vacíos en el conocimiento científico y dónde podía haber un conflicto en diferentes grupos interesados en este caso. Y el resultado mostraba entonces algunos conceptos que la ciencia científica a veces podía saber o que no podía estar muy segura de ello, lo cual mostraba entonces trataba de lidiar o trataba de ver los cambios en las políticas y las limitaciones que podía haber cuando se trata de proteger el medio ambiente para cuales ellas habían sido diseñadas.
And I will add that my department offers graduate programs at the master's and the PhD level in environmental and energy policy. And this is a degree that is designed for students who want to work in policy making or policy influencing fields. So it is not a typical academic degree, although we have had some students go on to work in academic careers. And we have a long history of recruiting students to use historical methodologies, historical approaches to understand environmental problems and to propose potential solutions.
Por supuesto, nuestro departamento está ofreciendo cursos de posgrado, tanto para maestría como doctorado, para los que estén interesados para ver los cambios en política, tanto para el uso de energía o para el medio ambiente, y sus estudiantes que trabajen para el cambio de política o para tratar de influenciar el cambio de política también. Muchas veces no tenemos muchos estudiantes de que estén interesados en un grado académico para simplemente hacer estudios simplemente para académicos, pero tenemos algunos que aún así lo hacen. Y muchas veces estudiamos también o tenemos estudiantes que estén interesados simplemente para ver a la historia y usar la historia también para ver los diferentes métodos y poder entender un programa ambiental o hacer cambio en ello.
And the other relevant program that we offer is a graduate program in industrial heritage and archaeology, which also has an MS and a PhD.
Otro de los programas que estamos ofreciendo, que son importantes también, son un programa de posgrado también, para aprender acerca de arqueología y herencia industrial en realidad.
Mhm. And this is a program that is the only industrial archaeology program in North America. And it began with a clear focus on archaeology, but has evolved to take a more expansive view of heritage as a historical subject as well. And our research group's focus is on post-industrial landscapes, post-industrial communities, and particularly communities with historic mining landscapes.
Un programa básicamente es el único programa en el cual se está viendo para la arqueología industrial en Norteamérica. Tiene más que nada un enfoque muy claro acerca de cómo es que el sistema ha evolucionado o debe evolucionar en este caso, porque claramente se puede ver de que este programa ha evolucionado más para expandirse y tener una visión más de herencia, sobre todo para el sujeto histórico. Muchos de los grupos de investigación se enfocan en básicamente las comunidades o áreas postindustriales, enfocándose también en áreas que tienen una historia de comunidades mineras y cómo han sido afectadas y cómo han pasado o evolucionado después de tanto tiempo.
And one of my colleagues, Dr. Timothy Scarlett, has long worked in this field and uses historical methods, although he is an archaeologist, uses historical methods to document historic landscapes, to identify potential hazards that remain from historic mining activities, to identify features such as buildings that have a high cultural value. And he has most recently begun to work on a project that focuses on the possibilities for the reuse of old industrial landscapes, particularly mines.
Uno de mis colegas, Timothy Scals, ha trabajado bastante en el campo y usa los métodos históricos, a pesar de ser un arqueólogo, para poder documentar y para revisar entonces las diferentes áreas históricas y muy probablemente también los problemas que puedan mantenerse en el área o peligros que puedan aún existir en el área debido a todas las actividades mineras en la historia del área que se investiga y también para poder identificar los edificios donde se pueda encontrar un valor cultural elevado. También estaría trabajando en un proyecto en el cual estaría tratándose de ver si nuevamente puede ser usada o reusada el área donde hubo actividad industrial, sobre todo en las minas.
Mhm. And I think even Dr. Scarlett would be a little surprised to have thought 10 years ago that he and others would be working using historical methods with engineers, with experts in electrical policy, and with private corporations who are interested in investing with this. And so it has been a very unique way of applying the historical understanding, in this case, of a mining community, to very new areas that have significant potential for economic development and for contributions to environmental sustainability in the long run.
Estoy seguro que el doctor Scarlett estaría sorprendido si hoy en día, si es que hace 10 años le hubieran dicho de que estaría trabajando usando métodos históricos, trabajando con ingenieros o con expertos en cambio de póliza eléctrica, sobre todo si es que si le hubieran dicho que también estaría trabajando con entidades corporativas privadas que están interesados en esto también. Esta es una forma muy única de poder aplicar el conocimiento histórico para las comunidades mineras, sobre todo en áreas nuevas que muestran el potencial para desarrollo económico y para mantenimiento también controlado para el futuro.
Right. Well, that is the end of the presentation that I had, and thank you, Andres, for that amazing live translation. If anyone has questions about either my own research or the research in my department, I am happy to answer them.
Entonces, esto es el final de mi presentación. Les agradezco bastante. Si tienen alguna pregunta acerca de mi investigación o la investigación de mis colegas, con mucho gusto estaría dispuesto a responder.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Amigos, amigas, si pueden revisar el chat, en el chat pueden ver el link de la Universidad Tecnológica de Michigan. Luego pueden ver el link de los posgrados en tal universidad. Luego, en el College de Arts and Science se ubica el Departamento de Ciencias Sociales. En este departamento es donde trabaja el profesor Robbins, y en este departamento tiene una serie de programas de posgrado, ¿no? Se ha destacado dos entre la variedad que tiene en estos programas de posgrado. Si bien Robbins es formado en historia, vemos que este posgrado en su departamento habla de políticas ambientales y energéticas, ¿no? Que invita, ¿no? A pensar una formación transdisciplinar, y otro programa de arqueología histórica. Les he compartido por correo electrónico los requerimientos para los programas. En el caso Michigan requiere un mínimo de 79 puntos en TOEFL, pero pensando, ¿no? En la competencia se requiere un puntaje un poco más elevado. El TOEFL, pues, es el certificado de inglés americano más conocido, más empleado. Luego, en el promedio de notas del pregrado, un promedio de 3.0, entendiendo que estamos traduciéndolo a nuestro porcentaje, que es 0 a 20, un promedio por encima de 15, por encima de 15. Luego, tres cartas de recomendación, ¿no? De especialistas en el área, ¿no? Vinculada pues a políticas energéticas y ambientales. Y el manejo en el pregrado de cursos como microeconomía, estadística y ciencias ambientales. Algo que quiero subrayar en este posgrado es, ¿no? Los alumnos, ¿no? Están considerando a los alumnos el apoyo financiero. Uno puede leer indica, ¿no? El 90% de los estudiantes recibe apoyo financiero en los derechos académicos y en los estipendios correspondientes, ¿no? Esta es la experiencia de Michigan Technological University en el Postgraduate Program del Department de Social Science, ¿no? Quiero subrayar eso para que se destaque las oportunidades presentes, ¿no? Bien. Jonathan, first, about the research, a topic very important is in the last late 20th century, in our century, the people like the word natural, no? The natural against industrial, but the natural in the food market is very old word, no? We can see an example, no? The American breakfast, no? The American breakfast we can find in late 19th century, John Harvey Kellogg, no? It's a surgeon, proposed on health spa in Michigan, your state, And this is the proposal is granola, no? So the American breakfast use this word, no? The natural or the image, no? The public image is natural against the traditional, but modern traditional breakfast, no? No natural, no? This is words, no? The naturals, the industrial, really very old words, no? But at the same time, very new, no? We can find the old narrative and new narrative about this natural and industrial, no? In our century, in 21st century, we can find with the soy, no? The soy. The people think the soy is the original Chinese soy, but really the soy is a proposal, the modern agriculture, no? The industrial, the Western agriculture in late 20th century, but the people, the common market believe, no? I buy the soy, but this soy is the original Chinese, Oriental, but we can find different narrative, no? Different narrative. At the same time, we live in 21st century. The people know we are in the age of change. Age of change. Lot of professors say this change is different the early 20th century. In early 20th century, we can see the British and American, no? The British rule, then the American rule, but both the Anglo-Saxon, no? Societies, culture. Yes, in 20th century, we can see the Western rule and Soviet rule, but really the Soviet rule, the majority, the Western rule, the financial, the Western rule. In 21st century, we can see not only Peking, Moscow, Ukrainian world, Brussels, Washington, but at the same time, we can see a new financial, no, new economical space, no? Some people talk about the BRICS. In agriculture history, in process, no? The agriculture, we can see the industrial proposal is very big impact in natural environmental. We see in the Western different regulations, different constitution, charts, and the law, no? The Western legal approach, very hard to agriculture, no? Production. But in the Oriental, no Western approach to the agriculture, we can see this strong approach, or we can see a flexible approach. No, we can talk about the agriculture as history, but at the same time, the contemporary agriculture, no? Your topic is about the commodities, no? Global commodities, for example, oil, no? And the other, but the idea is how the global commodities connect with this world in transition, no? The Western, no, rule and different rules.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Maldonado. I think I see maybe two ways to answer that question. And the first is where you began with this term natural, which I use I don't use it uncritically. One of the things I hope to show in my work is that non-plastic materials still involve significant industry, still involve significant technological inputs. And I am still trying to understand the extent to which natural fibers, that is not petroleum-derived fibers, are in fact sustainable or not. I think we assume that natural fibers, natural materials are inherently more ecological, but I think that remains to be demonstrated. And that is something I want to explore in this work. The other part of the question about the bigger structures of production and trade. This is a question I have intentionally avoided in the past because I find that many of the very stimulating scholarly debates about capitalism and globalization in the 1990s led to a dead end. They don't seem, at least in the areas of literature I work, to have produced some significant new ideas, new syntheses. And so I have in the past avoided trying to think about system level explanations. I focus on individual companies, on individual people, farmers, on government officials. And I think I'm now ready to start trying to think about bigger systematic questions. I don't have answers yet, but I think that is something that needs to be addressed. And I will just note there's a recent book from Oxford University Press, the Handbook of Commodity History, that has just been released with many contributions from scholars around the world. And we could not agree on a definition of commodity history or a single methodology that it represents. There's still no consensus on what this historical approach is or should be, but many diverse approaches. And I'm still learning a lot from my colleagues who have contributed to this book. So thank you, Professor.
Amigos, amigas, pueden compartir sus comentarios y sus preguntas, por favor.
I have a question. So you mentioned that about trying to do archaeology and using historic methods in recent industrial areas in the US. How would that apply in other first world countries or more Western countries? Like, for instance, could this be done in the old industrial areas in Great Britain as well, or in the more mining towns and areas in Germany? And have there been any plans to try to expand to said areas?
Yes, thank you. In terms of industrial heritage, in England and Germany is in fact where this movement began in the 1970s from a group of archaeologists who studied mostly 19th century and 20th century industry and were concerned about the destruction of factories, of other infrastructure. So the movement to protect industrial sites as cultural heritage, cultural patrimony, is very strong in many first world countries. It is also growing in China in particular. The government in China has a strong interest in promoting domestic tourism and sees industrial heritage as a path to that. In terms of reusing industrial spaces, and the example I showed was for generating electricity through storing hydroelectric power. The first working example of this is in fact in Wales in the United Kingdom. So it is a model that has been used in other parts of the world. And what we do in our department is try to adapt some of these ideas to contexts that are specific to North America, as well as to other parts of the world. At the moment, our faculty and students are primarily working on North American research questions, but we have in the past had students working on sites in Mexico, in Spain, in a number of other parts of the world.
Thank you. And one more thing, if I could. You did also mention about how the changes that happen in the industry because of the technological changes, these did not happen all of a sudden in a huge change, but were more like small changes that then started accumulating and making some other objects obsolete in change of plastics. You mentioned that as an example. Now, my question would be if with your research, you're planning to also try to make those small changes once more in the technological field in order to once more change from plastics to a different, more environmentally friendly material or methods.
That is the goal. I don't know if it can work, but I am designing this research project around that objective to see how far it is possible to apply these historical lessons to contemporary policy issues. I can't predict if it will work, if anyone will listen, or if there is even anything that is directly relevant to contemporary issues. But I haven't tried it yet, right? So until I attempt it, I can't be certain about what will or will not be effective or be feasible.
Very well then. Thank you.
Jonathan, this in your department, we can see this proposal, no? The policy, environmental and energy, no? The teamwork, the different science and social science profession, no? And second, the connection with the federal or regional states to different requests, no? The local community about the social science, historical archaeology, no? This proposal is very interesting because in this moment, in different countries, in different university, a lot of professors say the state, the university consider cancel this humanity program, cancel this social science program. This experience, the Michigan Technological University, is very connect with this moment, no, in this 21st century, no, this change, no. We can share more about this local experience in your postgraduate programs, this contact with the regional state, no, Michigan State, with the student, the course, or the research.
Yes, and the problem that you identify of universities and administrators looking for reasons to cut programs in history and social science and humanities. This is unfortunately the reality that we live in many countries. And my own attempts to use historical methods to address these contemporary problems does not have pure intellectual origins, right? It is an attempt to demonstrate the importance of these disciplines to people who are making decisions about what is valued and is not valued in universities. And I think at Michigan Tech, we have been fairly successful in doing that, in connecting different social science disciplines, including history, and building collaborations across those disciplines that allow different members of a team to address these issues and to pursue funding, which is unfortunately what many university administrators care about very much, external funding. And we've been very successful in gathering funding from mostly US federal agencies by combining researchers from different areas. As a historian, there is not much I can apply to for the US, the National Science Foundation, for example. They don't fund very much history. But when I collaborate with another social scientist, the opportunities expand. And so I think there is intellectual merit in this work, but there is also an opportunistic dimension to it as well, in trying to preserve our disciplines and preserve a place for it in the university.
In your programs, do you have Latin American students?
Mm-hmm. Currently, no. We have one graduate a few years ago, a PhD from Mexico. We have trying to think. It's been a number of years since we've had a Latin American student. Today, a significant number of our new applicants are from West African countries, which is an interesting shift in the university landscape. But we do we attempt to recruit internationally and domestically, and all students are eligible for the same opportunities in terms of funding through graduate assistant positions. And what we look for are students who have very strong research interests in a topic that we can help with. Not necessarily the topics that we work on, but topics that are in related fields where our expertise can help these students develop their own projects. So we do welcome applicants from everywhere, although our current population of students does not represent Latin America very well at the moment.
Peru has a big mining historical process. This difficult experience between the mining and local communities, land, weather, and this area can connect, no, social science, engineering, social science, political science, no, the mining, the weather, the land, and the local communities. In this area, the programs, no, the postgraduate programs in the Michigan Technological University has developed some research, mining, land, weather. Do you have research in this topic, mining, land, weather, and local communities?
So we have a significant history of colleagues working on studying mining communities in particular. One of our areas of interest in the past has been in the phenomenon of company towns, of corporate-owned villages and towns around mining sectors. And so we've had a lot of research into the material conditions of mine workers in the past, and the influence of that on mining history. We have not done as much with weather and environmental conditions more broadly. I think this is something. I have a student working with me currently his research is not in mining, but in forestry, in logging industries. But he's researching the ways in which extreme cold in the winter and extreme heat in the summer are shaped historic industrial industrial operations and shaped living conditions, working conditions, and ultimately shaped the success or the failure of industries in some places. So this is something that one of our students is working on now in the context of logging, but we still have many, I think, opportunities to think about weather in particular.
Personally, I research about the fishery. We have the local fishery, the big fishery, and the communities in the middle 20th century, no? For Peruvian experience, in middle 20th century start the cane, no? The factory, fishery factory. And this is transition between the artisanal and industrial fishery in our experience. Personally, I would like to know about the fishery study in your postgraduate programs. The other, in general, Peru has very the forests, no? We have the Amazonia. We have there are big market the woods, no? Forests, different kinds of woods. High attend is different country, and the other the agriculture. For example, quinoa is very famous. This Andean cereal, quinoa, Bolivia and Peru. There are global markets, no? But at the same time, we have local community and modern enterprise who produce the quinoa, no? And this topic, no? The local agriculture in global markets, no? This is a challenge, this connection in 20th century, no? For Peru, it's a transition, the late 20th century, early 21st century, 35 years, no? This is transition, this local production and big production, because original, the Andean cereal, the people used to eat the wheat, the Western, no? Breakfast, not the local breakfast. Now, in popular markets, usually you can see the people eat in urban cities, in urban population usually eats Andean cereals, but middle 20th century, you can see the middle and the heights market usually eats the Western cereals, not the Andean cereal. And this changed in late 20th century. So fishery, forest study, and agriculture study, yes, very interested. We have some topic very connect our local historical process. In your programs, the fishery study, the agriculture study, or the forest study, no? Who is developed?
Right. We our research in fisheries in the department has no one is currently researching it. In the previous decade, two different colleagues, a historian, Nancy Langston, who I mentioned, and an anthropologist colleague, Carol McLennan, were both researching different dimensions of fisheries history and fisheries policy regarding Lake Superior, which is the freshwater Great Lake that Michigan Tech is very, very close to. And so it's a very unusual fishery that they're studying. It's much smaller, certainly, than the Pacific Peruvian fisheries. And the research there has taken two main directions. One was looking at the impact of industry, mostly mining industry, on fish populations and fish habitats, and trying to understand the decisions of regulators who were trying to balance, trying to find a compromise between the interests of fishing business and mining business. And ultimately, the mining won for the most part. The other dimension that my colleague Carol McLennan has worked on is specifically addressing indigenous rights to fishing. And we at Michigan Tech live in next to a reservation of the Anishinaabe peoples and Ojibwe peoples of North America. And this community retained legal rights with the U.S. government to collect fish, and to collect fish not just for subsistence, but for market sale. And the impact of pollution from mining, as well as toxic chemicals, became a major issue for these communities, as well as overfishing in the 1950s. And there were a number of legal cases in which the indigenous community won. They prevailed in the court, and what resulted was the end of commercial fishing on the Great Lakes, at least commercial fishing by non-indigenous businesses. And the indigenous communities on the lake have kept the right to collect fish, but they still are dealing with questions of whether the fish are healthy to eat. There are significant accumulations of toxic materials in some fish that make them probably unsafe to eat. And so my colleague, Carol McLennan, the anthropologist, has been working with communities to try to communicate scientific findings about the potential risks of eating fish, as well as understanding from indigenous perspectives the importance of valuing and protecting the fishery, not just in terms of its economic value and its food value, but its cultural value as well. So we've had some research over the past 10 years that has looked at fisheries, but our current faculty and current students are not working on new fisheries projects at the moment. Forestry and logging is a major research interest for us. We have a huge domestic forest industry all around us. Michigan Tech is surrounded by trees, many of which are really plantations. They're planted, they grow for 20, 30 years, and then they cut down and they regrow again. And so I have an archaeologist colleague, Luann Wurst, who is working on studying the evolution of logging industries in very remote areas, areas that are very far away from urban centers and from ports and other modes of transportation, to try to understand both the historical evolution of these sites and also the ways in which capitalist business owners negotiated with wage workers to establish not just wages, but also living conditions and many other things that in an urban area might not be negotiated. But because these were logging camps in very remote areas where everything had to be provided, housing, clothing, food, equipment, it created a very different context for workers. And so that work is mostly focused on the 19th century and the early 20th century, again, on the US case. I'm sorry, I couldn't remember the last question that you had.
Well, this thing connect. Usually some programs developed Congress and seminar in the year, no? And activity connect the program with different program and different university. In your department this year, 24, the department project international event to share their research, international seminar or congress.
So as a department, we organize a weekly or occasional series of presenters who come from our own university, from neighboring universities, and from our international collaborators. So we do welcome presentations. These are typically done online like this through Zoom. Individual faculty members are involved in larger research organizations. My colleague Tim Scarlett that I mentioned is part of a consortium with universities in Norway and a few other countries, where they organize their own conferences and seminars as a research group. So colleagues in other fields do similar things. So as a department, we do have a regular series that provides a venue for presenting new research, but we don't organize a formal conference or something like that at the department level.
Okay. Amigos, amigas, si pueden ver en el chat, se puede apreciar que el requerimiento del posgrado se puede leer, se recomienda Michigan Tech requiere un mínimo de 79, ¿no? puntos en el TOEFL, y luego el IELTS es el examen para el inglés británico, pero el TOEFL es más conocido, y las fechas de aplicación, como puede leerse, la primera para los 2 semestres, ¿no? 15 de enero y 15 de septiembre, ¿no? Son las deadline para las aplicaciones. Y las respuestas se generan el 15 de marzo y el 15 de noviembre. Acerca de las cartas de recomendación, se entiende que son cartas de especialistas en el ámbito que tienen, que al mismo tiempo, ¿no? tengan conocimiento, ¿no? del medio, en este caso americano o anglosajón. Es una oportunidad, toda vez que, como se ha conocido, no es, si bien el Departamento de Ciencias Sociales tiene una formación transdisciplinar con especialistas de áreas de ciencias y ingeniería, lo cual hace muy atractivo, de una gran proyección, ¿no? Entonces, se ve que esta propuesta de Michigan Technological University va muy de acuerdo con los requerimientos del siglo que vivimos, y por ende con un gran impacto en nuestras comunidades locales, ¿no? Jonathan, si bien tiene una formación de historia, lo vemos que está inserto de un programa de ciencias sociales que proyecta un gran impacto sobre su comunidad local. Jonathan, these activities is the first, no? Between universities. At the same time, we have seminar physical in Lima, the global study, the transnational study. In the future, will be this year, you can project and visit Lima to develop, no? lecture here, no? At the same time, we can think about the share, no? The student, no? The research, your students, the postgraduate program about the environmental study, no? This connection, no? Between local production and local community, this connection very interesting, dynamics, the local authority, no? Local authority, local community, production, no? This triangle is very interesting, how to develop this process to share, no? There is the student, or could be professor in department, to our university, no? In hybrid or virtual, no? meeting, no? But at the same time, it's possible, why not, visit, no? to Lima. I don't know if your university has contact with Sudamerica University in general, no? Michigan Technological has link with Sudamerican University. I don't know.
Not many.
Okay. Well, could be opportunity. Peru in the central South Pacific. Peru is Amazonian highland and coast. Our coast is desertic. San Mar University is in Lima, capital of Peru, but at the same time, San Mar University has placed the research in Amazonia, highlands, and central coast. no? It's not only capital experience, but at the same time, national experience. Mm, last 23, I host a research the Zurich Technological University. His research about the scientists, he visited Lima and Peru in middle 19th century. No, this is history of science. No, early this year, January, we host doctoral student from UQAM, Quebec or Montreal. She researched about the cultural policy, the Mexican and Peru in 20th and 20th century, no? So, Peru has a historical process with the environmental topics, very, very interesting. I sure that student and professor could be connect with our historical process in forest study, in fishery study, mining study, or agriculture study, no? We can think how to help the people, the young student, to have this transnational, transregional, Pan-American experience, no? Pan-American experience, no? The North and South America. And how we can continue this exchange between departments and university.
Yes, I hope so. Thank you.
Well, amigos, amigas, ¿tienen algún comentario? ¿Tienen alguna pregunta? Well, Jonathan, thank you for the presentation, for your lecture. This is the first activity within university. In our history, you are the first professor from your university, our North American experience. I hope we can develop this contact and this exchange within our university. Question, Jonathan. In this moment, we have well, it's the summer, no? Now this a hot summer, but in America, in North America, you see the change in the summer. For example, a friend from La Sardegna, Italy, in the last summer, in 23, see 55 degree in summer, 55 degrees. The other colleague from Barcelona who traveled to Mexicali, no? In Los California, he see 52 degrees in Mexicali. In your experience in Michigan, the summer is very in this year, no? We can see a change or no? It's common.
Small change. Summers maybe 25, 30 if it's very hot. The big change is in winter. There should be many meters of snow on the ground, and it should be very cold. And instead, it's
this winter is hard.
Yeah, it's winter, and it's 7 degrees today. It should be -7.
Mm. Well, yes. Well, this is climate change, the other topic who can share experience. Well, amigos, amigas, un gran saludo. Muchas gracias por su presencia, por su asistencia. Les quiero hacer presente una invitación para que nos acompañen el próximo 16 de febrero. El 16 de febrero Tenemos un colega de la Universidad de Sussex que en ese momento está haciendo un research en St. Andrews, Universidad del Reino Unido. Su experiencia es muy importante porque él proviene de Zimbabue, de Sudáfrica, pero está actualmente trabajando en el Reino Unido temas de economía local, contextos inflacionarios, desde una perspectiva de la sociología económica. Entonces, nos encontramos el 16 de febrero en la mañana y este mes de febrero tenemos pues también la presencia de la profesora Whitfield de San Luis y del Departamento de Arquitectura Urbanística de la Universidad de Sao Paulo, que examina el tema de ciudades sostenibles en nuestro siglo. Ante todo, muchas gracias por su asistencia y estamos en contacto. Thank you very much, Jonathan, for your help, your participation. I hope that you can visit Lima this year or in the future.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Andres, for translating. Very difficult job.
It's no problem at all, sir. Thank you for your presentation.
Well, muchas gracias a todos y estamos en contacto. Perdón. Jonathan, we need a picture. Ever, ¿nos puedes ayudar con la... Sí, please. Ever,
Sí.
ya. Tú nos indicas en qué momento.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Perdón, Ever, Jonathan tenía la pantalla compartida o estaba sin compartir.
Estaba sin compartir la pantalla.
Correcto, entonces se ha tomado. Ya, ok.
Mm,
Bien,
No estoy teniendo problemas con mi video, o sea que no puedo mostrar.
ok, Andrés, estamos en contacto. Bien, gracias a todos. Jonathan, thank you, and we are in touch. Bye.
Goodbye, Dr. Jonathan. Take care.
Gracias. See you later.